The K30 Blazer is getting some love in this week's episode. I am replacing my old intake with a new Holley Mid Rise Ram intake. It's been on back order for a long time, but it finally showed up, and I'm stoked that this guy is coming together. There's still some work to do, but sit tight. Let's get into it. This is the Holley Mid Rise Ram intake, and I am super stoked on this thing. I've been waiting to install it for a long time. It was on back order forever, and it finally became available. So we're gonna be throwing this on the K30 Blazer over the next few days. Let's go all through the parts of this before I start throwing it together so you guys get an idea of what is on your intake and what the sensors are all about. So this obviously is the Trailblazer SS intake that I took off. These are the intake seals that we're not going to be using anymore. This port right here, this is used for your brake booster. And I'm going to be using this port right here with this elbow for my vacuum for my brake booster. Moving forward on top, you're going to have another vacuum port. This is going to tell you manifold absolute pressure. I'm going to be using that for the vacuum line into the interior to the computer, and then this port right here will be using this sensor. I happen to have this in my parts kit. It's a 1-bar map sensor. This is what came off of my intake right here, but it's a different fitting, so I'm just using this one that I had lying around. I scavenged off of something, I expect. So you've got 3 components to this intake. You've got the base. This is actually the manifold itself. Then you're going to have the plenum base, which goes on here, and then you have the top piece that comes on, that's the plenum. The old intake obviously needs to come off before the new intake can go on. So first, purge all the pressure from your fuel lines. You don't want to get sprayed with fuel. It makes for a bad day, trust me. So purge your fuel lines of any pressure. You're still going to have residual in the lines when you take it off, but it won't be spraying in your face, hopefully. You're going to undo all of the sensors. You're going to undo all of the vacuum lines. Pull off your fuel rails, pull off the injectors, take out the intake, and make sure that you cover it up when it's out. You do not want anything falling down into your engine. Trust me, it's almost worse than getting sprayed with fuel. When I dropped the LS into my Blazer about 6 years ago, I upgraded to the Trailblazer SS intake over the just factory truck intake that it came with. That came with a better flowing manifold, a bigger throttle body, and bigger injectors, and has been fantastic. Last year I upgraded to the Holley Terminator X Max and the Holley harness. I also upgraded injectors and various other things at the time. And now I'm finally getting to install this intake. It's been on back order forever, and it performs about as well as the Trailblazer SS, which in itself is a fantastic intake. So I don't expect a ton of power increase, but that's okay. Sometimes power isn't as necessary as bitchin' good looks. The amazing thing about YouTube is the detailed analytics I get. And I know that 70% of you guys who are watching this video are not subscribers. Let's change that. Click that button, become subscribed, and let's go get it. It's important when installing something either onto the block or onto the heads that you get things tightened down in a certain pattern. You don't want to just crank down one corner of the manifold and then another corner, because you will end up with air gaps. And any air gap that exists between the manifold and the head is an area of opportunity for air that is unmetered to get sucked in and added to the charge. That's going to make the readings at your O2 sensor inaccurate, because it's got air that's coming in that isn't being counted by the mass airflow, or in my case, by the manifold absolute pressure sensor. So there will be specific bolt pattern orders and torque schedules that you need to follow when putting in something like a head or a manifold. It's not difficult. You're just going to use a certain pattern and a certain torque ratio. Just follow the manufacturer's guidelines and you will be just fine. But don't skip this step. It is an important one. So here, this is just the top cover of the intake that I'm putting on. The Trailblazer SS intake, you can see it's all together. So you have your intake, the top, you've got the plenum, and then you got the manifold itself. So we'll jump into this one because it has all the sensors on it. Some of the sensors are on here and some of them are already in the truck first. But fundamentally, what you need to understand is anytime with any computer controlled vehicle, any gasoline engine, the magic is reading the air quality coming in and measuring it to the air quality going out. So in a traditional setup, you have what's called a mass airflow sensor that is reading the volume of the air coming in before it even gets to the throttle body. You'll have a mass airflow sensor in the intake tube. You also have an O2 sensor in your exhaust. So the air comes in, we get a reading from the mass airflow. As it runs through the engine, gets turned into power and gets pushed out as exhaust, you still have trace oxygen levels in that air, and that's what the O2 sensor is going to read. And so from that, you can determine this is how much air I have coming in, or technically oxygen, and this is how much oxygen is being expelled. Wasted oxygen coming out of your tailpipe means wasted power. So the computer will try and adjust that so that the amount of fuel or unburnt oxygen leaving through the tailpipe is diminished. You want to get to a point where they're balanced. The amount coming in and the amount going out means that they're balanced so that you are using all that capable energy and oxygen to create more power. With the Holley system, and this is getting down in the weeds, but it is an important differentiator, you're not using the mass airflow. You use a speed density. Speed density, the cliff notes is it's essentially taking a look at the temperature of the air, the absolute pressure, and it's using those two numbers instead of just the mass airflow to figure out how much fuel is being spent and how much oxygen is being burned, and adjust those tables and injector rates and timing all on the fly for you. So different systems, similar results. The speed density is a little bit easier to work with, in my opinion, because you don't have to deal with a temperamental mass airflow sensor, which has to be positioned perfectly and has to have uninterrupted clean airflow. This is, instead of measuring off of flow, it's measuring more off of the vacuum, what the density of the air is inside the actual plenum before it gets dispersed into the cylinders and exploded into power. So you guys are gonna have to excuse me right now. I'm gonna do a little rant on expectations when it comes to modifying your junk. Nothing goes smoothly. Nothing is truly bolt on. No matter what they say, no matter what the product description says, the chances are you're gonna have to modify something. You're gonna have to clearance something. You're gonna have to move something. You're gonna have to adjust and grind something to make things fit. And I think this is what intimidates a lot of people. They know that the project is going to be more involved than it is described on YouTube. So I'm here to tell you guys the reality is, yes, they're right. Things are difficult. Things do take time and thought to go in, and this intake has been no exception. I've had to clearance the upper cover so it clears the cross member. I've had to get a spacer, a throttle body spacer, so it clearance all the pulleys. I've had to change my return fuel line 90-degree elbow because it hit and would not tighten when it ran into the alternator. So there's always issues. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So just so you guys can see, look down in there. That is, yeah, that's the clearance I have between that tensioner pulley and my throttle body. Now, that's gonna be okay. I think it's gonna self-clearance eventually, and it's not really gonna be rubbing all that bad. And then the other issue, well, one of the other issues, let's see if I can get you a view of that. That right there is how close the cross member came to the manifold upper. So I had to heavily grind down the manifold to get it to fit under there. And then the other issue I just mentioned, Let's see if I can get you a shot on right there. Look at that. I'm still not happy with this, and I'm gonna have to adjust and get this dialed in so it clears. There's just recognize that things do not always go together smoothly, and that's okay. Part of the fun is figuring out how to make all this stuff go together. Take your time, methodically work through it, identify what you can change and what you cannot change. I feel like a life coach right now. And ultimately, just persevere, and it will go together, and it will fit, and it will perform. It's just not gonna be a cakewalk. It's not gonna be handed to you. That's Merricks Garage, personal rant, public service announcement for this episode. Let's go finish this thing. Intake is in for the most part. I have the belt all connected back up. I've got the throttle body connected. All the sensors are connected. So I am going to pressurize the system. And before I crank it over, we're gonna watch my pressure gauge to see if it maintains. And that looks to be holding. So I'm gonna turn it off. We'll see if the pressure drops, and that will tell me if I have a leak or not. Now I'll watch it over the next minute or two to see how quickly I get pressure drop. But I think we're looking pretty good here, so I might be firing it up here shortly. Perfect timing. We're gonna start it up, and Esteban showed up, so I'm gonna hand him.
Safety first.
Safety first.
Something like that.
But check it out. My pressure is still holding. I think we're good. Let's give it a fire up. Here, you wanna hold this and film? And be firefighter at the same time.
Multitasking at its best.
Can you do all that? Okay. Intake swap. I don't know why I'm so nervous about it. After 8 years, I think this die-hard battery has finally kicked the bucket.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try it again.
Take 3. Take 15.
I think Esteban's been filming all of this, so I'm having some starting issues that doesn't seem to be fuel related, but we don't know for sure. So my firefighter cameraman fire starter is going to hold the camera, spray starting fluid into the manifold, and man the fire extinguisher while I crank it over. What could go wrong? You got this?
I got it. I've been training for this my whole life. That's some pretty fire there. Take 22.
Well, that took about 300 tries to get this thing to fire. And all an engine needs to turn over is going to be fuel, air, and spark. And so if you have those three things and they're all set up correctly, you should have a running engine. So I knew I had fuel pressure because we were watching that on the gauge. I knew I had air because I'm breathing. and we found I had spark, but it still wasn't working. And so what I determined was my coil packs, right there, you see all those coil packs? They are individually wired so the computer can tell the appropriate cylinder, injector, and coil to fire at the same time. I had removed these and I'd reinstalled the harness backwards. So cylinder number 1 was firing when cylinder number 7 should have been firing, and cylinder number 5 was firing when 3, vice versa. So I pulled the coils, reversed the harness, reconnected, and we were good to go. I still got some little things to wrap up, zip tie down the brake lines, add in the air filter, and tighten up some stuff, but it is up and running again, and I'm stoked. If you have not seen any of my videos of when I swapped this in, or when I put the Holley system or installed the cam, I'm gonna put up some of my videos up here that detail all that stuff. So go check them out, and we'll see you next week. Merricks Garage.